Welcome to another episode of This Guy, the show that highlights one guy making America worse and explores the many ways they suck. I'm Erin Ryan, host of Crooked Media's Hysteria podcast.
And I'm Julia Claire, Crooked Media's, joke witch.
Is that really your job title?
Literate clown, maybe? I think if I say it enough, HR will have to formally recognize it at some point.
Okay. And I should note for our audience that we did dress alike today. And it was not on purpose. No.
Our pants are different, we swear.
Our pants are different. On this episode, we're talking about a fucking guy who started a website designed to creep on girls too hot to talk to him and ended up ruining the entire fucking world. Mark Zuckerberg.
A guy who had one good idea, followed by several stupid and bad ideas, and then eventually gave up on actually having original ideas and focused instead on buying up things other people came up with and then ruining them. His actual original idea, the one that made him a billionaire, is now referred to on Wikipedia as a, quote, non-informing, knowledge-eroding medium.
Sounds great. A man who proves that money can't buy the ability to blink with appropriate frequency. And all the martial arts neck-strengthening regimens in the world can't teach a wet little tech mouth to not make excessive spit sounds into a microphone. And that near infinite wealth cannot buy you a good personality.
A malignant nerd, an alpha doofus, the apex goober.
A fake-ass bitch for the history books.
Hashtag no filter.
Mark Zuckerberg was born in Dobbs Ferry, New York, to a psychiatrist mother and a dentist dad. His psychiatrist mom eventually quit being a doctor to help out at her husband's dental practice, which is sort of like quitting your job as a chef at 11 Madison Park to be a hostess at your husband's Applebee's.
More of a TGI Fridays girl myself.
Mark was one of 4 children and the only boy. All of the baby Zuck information I could find described him as a computer whiz who liked to work on little projects for just his family members to use.
Did one of those little projects involve stealing family photos and having users vote on which of his sisters was hotter?
No, he actually did kind of cute things like develop messaging software his family could use called ZuckNet, and that's the last time he made anything useful. Zuck attended Exeter Academy, a boarding school in New Hampshire.
School motto, do you know who my father is?
He then famously attended Harvard University.
School motto, the Harvard of assholes.
One night in 2003, drunk and mad that he'd been rejected, so the story goes, Mark got the brilliant idea to create a website to rank the bangability of his fellow Harvard classmates. He did this by, like Julia alluded to earlier, stealing fellow students' photos and posting them online without their permission. Visitors to the site would be greeted with side-by-side photos of their classmates, and then they would click on the one that they thought was hotter. It was called Face Mash.
See, kids these days don't engage in intellectual pursuits anymore. Not like 2003, when the country's brightest minds were asking themselves, would I do her?
The computer whiz to horny menace pipeline needs to be studied. In a diary he kept at the time, Mark suggested comparing his female classmates to farm animals before settling on comparing them to each other.
Possibly foreshadowing Farmville?
Because college students are enormous shitheads, the site was a hit, although it did get Mark in trouble, not only with Harvard brass, but also years later with the United States Congress. Here's Zuckerberg being asked about his theft-based website while testifying before Congress in 2018.
What was Face Smash, and is it still up and running?
No, Congressman.
What?
Face Smash was a prank website that I launched in college, in my dorm room, before I started Facebook.
Put up pictures of 2 women and decide which one was the better, more attractive of the 2, is that right?
Congressman, that is an accurate description of the prank website that I made when I was sophomore.
Even though it was short-lived, R.I.P. Sweet Prince, Face Smash did catch the attention of some of Mark's classmates who had wanted to develop an online social network for Harvard kids to creep on each other. Connect with each other. Those classmates claimed that the network that eventually became Facebook was their idea. Mark claims that it was his, and that little disagreement became the basis for several big-ticket lawsuits and a lot of rich boy butthurt.
If you want to learn more about this, you should watch the little-known 2010 Aaron Sorkin film, The Social Network. Ever heard of it?
Pretty obscure.
Yeah. A film that may set an all-time record for hardest right turn in a sequel if they ever make a sequel. Although I don't know if today's movie audiences have much of a taste for nerd-assisted genocide.
Yeah, that's a rough sell. Another thing I love about The Social Network, which, by the way, still holds up, it's a real accidental 2010 time capsule. It's got Armie Hammer. It's got Justin Timberlake. It's got people not talking at all about midterm elections that ended up being incredibly important.
If they had found a way to include that Black Eyed Peas song, that now is exclusively played at bar mitzvahs, I think that it would have been like a perfect 2010 experience.
Around this time, college Mark met Priscilla Chan, a fellow Harvard student who would eventually become his wife. Despite all the divorced guy energy that Zuck gives off now, he and Priscilla are still married and have a family together, which raises the question, has Mark Zuckerberg only ever had one real girlfriend?
It seems possible to likely.
If you are Mark Zuckerberg's ex-girlfriend, please email us at hysteria@crooked.com.
You may be entitled to compensation.
Legally, we cannot promise compensation to Mark Zuckerberg's ex-girlfriend.
I didn't say we'd give it to them. I just said that they may be entitled to it.
Okay, that's fair. One would think Zuck would have been flattered by the fact that a screenplay basically about him was written by the legendary Aaron Sorkin, the guy behind The West Wing, which at one time was one of Mark Zuckerberg's favorite shows, according to his Facebook profile. But Zuck was not flattered.
Sorkin himself also did not intend for his depiction of Zuckerberg in the film to be flattering. And when he was told by a New Yorker writer in 2010 that Zuck was a fan of his earlier work, Sorkin said, "I wish you hadn't told me that."
I can picture Sorkin doing exactly that. There are a few things funnier than artists informing their douchebag fans that they hate them. Like, remember when the Dropkick Murphys tweeted, "We literally hate you," at Wisconsin governor and avowed Dropkick Murphys fan Scott Walker? That was hilarious.
Incredible stuff.
Great stuff.
A few days after that conversation, according to the profile, Zuckerberg removed The West Wing from his list of favorite shows on his Facebook profile.
And that might be the saddest sentence we have ever been forced to utter on this show.
Mark's leadership of Facebook since its famed and now hallowed creation has been fraught with scandals, missteps, and overtly unethical business practice. You might even call some of those practices illegal if you're into that sort of thing. Zuckerberg repeatedly made deliberate choices to exploit users' basest instincts and showed a routine disregard for user privacy and, the public good.
Considering the company's early years were a time when Mark was not legally old enough to rent a car, he can almost be forgiven for acts of hubris or callousness. But at a certain point, it became clear that Mark was, in official economic terms, a business douche.
The creation of the newsfeed in 2006 basically invented the social media we know today, to the point where explaining it almost feels quaint. Instead of having to individually check each of your friends' profiles, the newsfeed let you know everything all of your friends were doing and every change in their lives in real time, right on your user homepage.
In the age of oversharing, this probably seems like no big deal, but many Facebook users found the change extremely intrusive, as if they'd suddenly been thrust into a panopticon. They were pissed. This was the end of the Bush administration, man. Everyone was rejecting the surveillance state.
Within hours, anti-newsfeed Facebook groups had amassed hundreds of thousands of members. Tens of thousands of users emailed Facebook customer service to complain, and a handful of people actually went so far as to protest live in front of Facebook's Palo Alto headquarters.
But what did they care? Engagement had never been higher, like crazy high. User growth exploded seemingly overnight by over 600%. This was the addictive key to the kingdom. And so, our modern algorithmic nightmare was born.
Facebook's first president, Sean Parker, admitted a few years back that from the very beginning, the website was deliberately designed to exploit people's cognitive weaknesses.
If the thought process that went into building these applications, Facebook being the first of them to really understand it, that thought process was all about how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible. And that means that we need to sort of give you a little dopamine hit every once in a while because someone liked or commented on a photo or a post or whatever. And that's going to get you to contribute more content, and that's going to get you, more likes and comments. I mean, it's a social validation feedback loop. I mean, it's exactly the kind of thing that a hacker like myself would come up with because you're exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. And I think that the inventors, creators, understood this consciously, and we did it anyway.
Thanks for giving us a heads up about that at the time, Sean.
Also clear from Facebook's early days was the sense that Zuck and the rest of Facebook were pretty loosey-goosey with user privacy. In November 2007, Facebook launched its Beacon ad program, which tracked user behavior on third-party sites, meaning what you were doing even when you were not on Facebook. So a late-night session of perusing the knot after making out with your crush from Organic Chem Lab at a St. Patrick's Day party would be broadcast to anyone who was able to see your page.
The feature caused a small rebellion among users, and finally, after a month, the company introduced the ability of users to turn it off. It was clear Zuckerberg didn't know how to handle what were becoming regular cycles of blowback to his decisions. Turns out the boy king could code, but he couldn't govern.
Yeah, carve that into some stone. Those first few years in Palo Alto were marked by instability at Facebook as Zuck went through senior executives like Kleenex in a freshman dormitory.
Oh, God.
Things leveled out in 2008 with an influx of former Google employees. Chief among them was COO Sheryl Sandberg.
In 2009, after yet another update to Facebook's privacy policies and the backlash that ensued, Zuckerberg declared that privacy was, quote, an evolving social norm. Ugh, why does everything this guy says sound like he's in a support group for polyamorous virgins?
Zuck and Sandberg repeatedly assured everyone that the majority of what their users share was voluntary and definitely not the result of default privacy settings that were opaque and complicated to change.
Every time we mention Sheryl Sandberg, a girl boss gets her wings. And by that I mean gets a custodian fired at McKinsey or Deloitte, probably.
Time and again, when growth slowed at Facebook, Mark would find a new way to juice the algorithm. It was all in pursuit of what former New York Times journalist and author of The Chaos Machine, Max Fisher, called exceeding the cognitive limits of human socialization.
Max is actually one of our colleagues here at Crooked, so we could ask him about this, but we're not gonna. This is our show and our rules, and we call the shots about how many times to call attention to Mark Zuckerberg's sickly complexion and weak chin.
Guys, what the hell? I'm right here.
Not now, Max.
Whatever.
In 2008, Fisher writes that Facebook's explosive growth had stalled and their user base was holding steady at about 90 million.
Zuck was plagued by what's known as the Dunbar limit, the theory that human beings can, from a cognitive perspective, maintain stable relationships with only about 150 people maximum.
Naturally, the Silicon Valley overlords deemed this the Dunbar curse, seeing it as a natural ceiling for user growth. Mark tried to crack the Dunbar limit in 2008 and sort of failed, but 5 years later he tried again and succeeded due to increased neck strength. The result was great for Facebook and a global blight for everyone else.
Zuck knew in 2013 that in order for Facebook to grow, it would have to become a place to connect not just with people you know, but near strangers. Facebook called these, quote, weak ties.
What about people you don't know but you share overlapping interests with? Getting connected with them might compel you to spend more time on Facebook, wouldn't it?
In 2013, Facebook revamped its news feed and added application sections to feature each person's individual tastes in music, books, and other entertainment. Users would then be recommended groups based on those interests. Groups had existed for years prior to that for users to search and join as they chose. But now the site was actively pushing users towards them based on real or perceived leanings.
This configuration and the subsequent explosion in groups is where you see a lot of Facebook's problems move from online to very real life. We can thank Facebook's algorithmically programmed groups function for things like QAnon violence, ISIS recruitment, and the proliferation of the anti-vax movement. And January 6th. Great stuff.
Say a woman who joined Facebook and marked her interests to include parenting, Christianity, and had some sort of a bent for conservative politics. Facebook would almost immediately start recommending she join conspiracy-minded right-wing groups like QAnon or, I don't know, whatever Mel Gibson is up to these days.
Do you ever think of the fact that he starred in a movie called What Women Want and like almost get an aneurysm? I do that sometimes.
And he was People's Sexiest Man Alive.
Yeah. Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson.
Woof. A different user who joined a noted interest in organic food, opposed use of chemical pesticides, and non-traditional medicine would be pushed into anti-vax groups. They should have been pushed toward using real deodorant. That natural stuff is not cutting it.
Okay, fine. Message received, Erin. These aren't hypothetical situations or inferences. Facebook actually employed researchers to make hundreds of these dummy profiles to see where the site would lead them, and the results were always down a rabbit hole towards some sort of radicalization. The company wasn't intentionally trying to radicalize people per se, but its core algorithm was designed to make users spend as much time on the platform as possible. So the effect was the same.
The researchers' findings were shared with Facebook executives, but no one made a peep until former Facebook project manager Frances Haugen leaked thousands of documents pointing to a pattern of Facebook and Zuckerberg consistently choosing profit over public safety.
Haugen worked in Facebook's civic misinformation team, a department we have to imagine doesn't exist anymore. The reams of documents Haugen leaked to the Securities and Exchange Commission showed that Facebook's own data and stable of experts raised red flags about the deluge of hate speech and vaccine misinformation on Facebook, Instagram's negative psychological impact on teenagers, and many more deeply serious topics to company leadership. The response from them? Crickets.
An internal presentation on hooking more children on Facebook's products included a question about whether there was, quote, a way to leverage play dates to drive growth among kids. Play dates! Jail! Straight to jail!
It's not just that Mark Zuckerberg created products that were ripping giant holes in our collective societal fabric, but he also seemed to kind of relish in engaging in the kind of anti-competitive business practices that have come to be the norm in Silicon Valley.
Let's take virtual reality as an example. So starting all the way back in 2014, Mark wanted to go 2 feet in on VR when Facebook acquired the company Oculus. In 2019, he launched Facebook Horizon, the company's virtual reality world. By October 2021, Facebook had rebranded as Meta in a show of Mark's commitment to creating a metaverse and to never making a single friend in real life.
That's right. Instead of building VR products in-house, Meta instead just bought up as many companies in the field as it could. As of 2022, they had gobbled up about 85% of the virtual reality market share, according to the International Data Corporation.
There's a name for that, isn't it? Is it Lollapalooza?
Yeah, something like that.
Is it Parcheesi? Is it Hi-Ho-Cheerio?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. As of writing this, Meta has acquired over 90 companies in under 20 years. President Joe Biden's Federal Trade Commission chair, Lina Khan. Okay, Lina Khan became the first FTC chair in the better part of a century to broadly exert the agency's watchdog muscle in an attempt to clamp down on corporate anti-competitive practices immediately upon her taking office.
Naturally, she led the government in filing multiple lawsuits against Meta, including an attempt to block Meta from acquiring yet another virtual reality company. That fight is ongoing.
The Trump administration's FTC also sued Meta in 2020 over allegations that the company had bought rival social media companies Instagram and WhatsApp in 2012 and 2014, respectively, to crush any would-be competition, though that case, which we love, by the way.
Yes, we love it.
Good one, was likely brought more out of Trump's personal history with Facebook than an objection to corporate monopolies. Regardless, that case is set to begin trial on April 14th of this year.
Okay, that was pretty heavy. Time for something fun.
I agree. Let's unwind a little and take a trip down memory lane when Mark Zuckerberg got his ass hauled before Congress in 2018 to answer for the Cambridge Analytica data scandal.
Quick recap. Cambridge Analytica was a right-wing data firm owned by conservative megadonor Robert Mercer. Steve Bannon sat on the company's board. In 2014, the company scraped private data from as many as 87 million Facebook users, most of them Americans, to build voter profiles and help the campaigns of Republican candidates, including Donald Trump in the 2016 presidential election, and also Brexit.
This all came to light when a trove of documents was leaked to the New York Times by a Cambridge Analytica employee. Turns out the illegal data harvesting was aided by Palantir Technologies, co-founded by yet another right-wing megadonor, American billionaire Peter Thiel, who, wouldn't you know it, also sits on Facebook's board of directors and was the company's first outside investor. Just a turducken of evil conservative billionaires. Let's look at Mark's congressional testimony on the matter.
You announced recently that the official policy of Facebook now allows politicians to pay to spread disinformation in 2020 elections and in the future. So I just want to know how far I can push this. Could I pay to target predominantly Black zip codes and advertise them the incorrect election date?
No, Congresswoman, you couldn't. We have, even for these policies around the newsworthiness of content that politicians say and the general principle that I believe that...
But you said you're not going to fact check my ads.
We have, if anyone, including a politician, is saying things that can cause, that is calling for violence or voter or census suppression when we roll out the census suppression policy, we will take that content down.
So you will, there is some threshold where you will fact check political advertisements. Is that what you're telling me?
Well, Congresswoman, yes, for specific things like that, where there's imminent risk of harm.
Could I run ads targeting Republicans in primaries saying that they voted for the Green New Deal? I mean, if you're not fact-checking political advertisements, I'm just trying to understand the bounds here. What's fair game?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I think
So you don't know if I'll be able to do that?
I think probably.
It's not every day that a prep school pipsqueak becomes a global menace, but Mark Zuckerberg showed us that with enough money, power, and Adderall, anything is possible, except knowing what to do with your hands while speaking in public.
You know what? I'll give that one to him. It's hard.
But we're not doing this.
No,
tell you
that's
that.
right.
This video is already getting kind of long, but you're still here, so we know you love it. So we've decided on a greatest hits approach to Facebook, and Mark Zuckerberg made catastrophes around the world.
Many of them more or less follow the same pattern. Rumors, conspiracy theories, and hate speech about a particular minority or ethnic group swirl on Facebook. Facebook is notified by locals, activists, and human rights groups who plead for the company to intervene, but it does not, resulting in real-world hate crimes that often turn deadly.
This horrifying sequence of events most infamously occurred in the form of genocide in Myanmar in 2017, when the country's Buddhist majority unleashed a torrent of unthinkable violence on the Rohingya, an already oppressed Muslim minority community.
Hateful rumors and conspiracy theories about the Rohingya had been spreading at warp speed on Facebook for years prior. Okay, actually, this is getting kind of dark. I feel like we need to mix up the energy and maybe call in some expertise. Max Fisher, fine, you can join this part since you wrote a book on this or whatever, even though it kills us to have a man speak on Hysteria's sacred mics.
Oh, pals, I'm so honored to be here shattering the glass floor. All right, it's time for a game called What's Mark Gonna Do?
Buzzers.
Get your buzzers ready, contestants. Okay, it's 2017. The United Nations has just accused Mark Zuckerberg's platform of playing a, quote, determining role in triggering a mass genocide in Myanmar. Rights groups in the country go public with documents showing they'd warned Zuck's top executives for years that Facebook was systematically promoting incitements to genocide. Thousands are dying every day. What is Mark gonna do? A, switch off his platforms in Myanmar until he can figure out what's going on. B, comply with the UN's request to share Facebook data that they say could help them to slow the killing. Or C, blow off the UN, have one of its executives say he's refusing to turn off Facebook in Myanmar because it might harm, quote, small businesses, then give an interview where he brags about setting up a program to stop Myanmar users from committing acts of genocide, which later turns out to be someone else's program that he stole credit for. Your answer, Julia.
C.
It's C, that's right.
In a violent crackdown by the Burmese military, 6,700 Rohingya were killed, including over 730 children under the age of 5. The country's troops raped Rohingya women and girls. Years later, tens of thousands of Rohingya have been displaced, forced to flee Myanmar.
This is undoubtedly the most severe example of Facebook's harm internationally, but similar events occurred on a smaller scale in Mexico in 2016, India in 2017, Sri Lanka in 2018, and Ethiopia in 2020.
Here in the States, Facebook continued to wreak havoc as well. Take it away, Max.
This fucking guy is brought to you by Armra Colostrum. You guys know that I'm not what you'd call a health freak, but I am health curious. I like to make sure that my body, which is the only one I get, is well taken care of, in good fighting shape, in good running shape, in good being a mom shape. And that's why I like Armra Colostrum. I'm just in a petri dish of germs all the time. I've got 2 little kids. They're bringing germs around me, and I need whatever I can get when it comes to keeping myself from getting sick as often as they do. Fortified gut health. Gut health is really important. It's not necessarily the sexiest thing to talk about, but if your gut feels bad, you feel bad. Nothing feels good when your gut is not working right. Ignited metabolism. Got to metabolize that food you're eating. You gotta turn that into fuel. Feel better about yourself, feel better about your life. Enhanced skin radiance. Everybody wants radiant skin, and so do I. Also, fueled performance and recovery. I'm getting back into physical activity. I'm going to start long distance running again. I used to be a distance runner. I gave it up. And now I've become a lot older than I was when I was running in the past. And so recovery is really important to me. Armra Colostrum offers benefits that meet all of these goals for my overall health. And if you're interested in those things, I encourage you to check it out too. We've worked out a special offer for our audience here. Receive 15% off your first order. Go to tryarmra.com/guy and enter guy to get 15% off your first order. That's TRYARMRA.com/guy.
It's 2017. Donald Trump has just won the presidency. During the election, Zuck's algorithms promoted far-right outlets, fake news pages, and Russian propaganda so heavily that Breitbart News reached more people on his platform than the Washington Post. Conspiracies that arose on Facebook dominate national politics. Regulators, lawmakers, and the company's own executives are asking whether Facebook is driving American politics and therefore America into the sewer. Pals, what's Mark gonna do? A, scale back his bullshit promoting algorithms and impose safeguards against misinformation and hate speech? Is it B, put out some sort of press release, at least pretending to take any of this seriously? Or is it C, dismiss concerns about fake news as foreign meddling as, quote, crazy, then issue a rambling 6,000-word manifesto arguing that the solution to polarization, extremism, and loneliness is for more people to use Facebook? Erin, your answer.
C.
It's C. That's right.
Okay, Max, something tells me you've got one more terrible piece of Mark Zuckerberg trivia for us. Go on then, let us have it.
It's 2018. Mark Zuckerberg is facing national backlash over his platforms blasting millions of users with posts by the far-right personality Alex Jones, who, with Facebook's help, is spreading conspiracies that the Sandy Hook school shooting was a government hoax and is directing thousands of people to harass the victims' families. Contestants, what's Mark gonna do? A, apologize to the victims' families and take down the conspiracy pages for the easiest PR win in history. B, have his staff find some rule that the page is violated so he can remove them in a technicality without getting overly political. Or C, favorably compare Alex Jones to Holocaust denial, emphasizing that both are welcome on Facebook. Your answer, contestants. Waiting for buzzers. Erin.
C.
It's C! Holocaust denial on Facebook. That is correct.
All right, Max, I think that's enough. You're dismissed.
Well, I have more questions.
No, you gotta go.
Okay.
Zuckerberg did finally ban Alex Jones later, after Apple did it first, though he later said he regretted it, telling a reporter, "I don't believe that it is the right thing to ban a person for saying something that is factually incorrect." A consistent through line in the Mark Zuckerberg story is the ineptitude that he and others at Facebook showed at solving problems that Facebook created.
At the beginning of 2018, a battle-worn Mark Zuckerberg pledged to fix Facebook's problems with misinformation, content moderation, data privacy, and more, and vowed to win back user trust.
He said the company had, quote, fundamentally altered its DNA and assured users that there were now over 30,000 employees specifically working on these safety issues. The algorithm would now promote, quote, meaningful social interactions, or MSI. But whoopsie daisy, these changes ended up somehow making things worse.
No!
Yeah.
Yep. Once again, Facebook's own internal research told the ugly truth that the attempted fix had somehow been actively counterproductive. And despite the fact that health groups were no longer promoted by Facebook's algorithm to try to cauterize the deluge of anti-vax misinformation, that persisted as well.
When did they stop promoting health groups? Was it around 2014 when the first major waves of anti-vax sentiment was spreading in the United States, 2016?
September 2020. I can't remember. Was something going on that year? Tiger King.
Yeah, that's right.
That's it.
You're so right. Enter COVID, stage left. In March 2021, Zuckerberg announced that he would use Facebook's copious resources to encourage people to get the COVID-19 vaccine. Partnering with global health organizations, Zuck set a goal to get 50 million people vaccinated. In one memo, Facebook called protecting the rollout of COVID vaccines, quote, a top company priority.
Unfortunately, internal documents and subsequent studies showed that Facebook's efforts to combat misinformation through implementing various policies were undermined time and again by the core design features of the platform itself.
Posts from trusted authorities on vaccine information became, quote, cesspools of anti-vaccine comments, often full of outright falsehoods and debunked myths. Many of the anti-vax activists flooding the comments had themselves been radicalized by misinformation they saw on Facebook.
By summer 2021, the prevalence of false and misleading vaccine information on Facebook prompted a public scolding from President Biden, who said the falsehoods were killing people. And this is one of those rare cases when someone says something is killing people and it's not a hyperbole.
Right. Basically, whatever Facebook did to combat the spread of anti-vaccine misinformation didn't work because the platform and its algorithms were essentially designed to spread misinformation and had been doing so quite successfully for many years.
A 2023 study found that despite Facebook's efforts to remove anti-vax content during the COVID-19 pandemic, overall engagement with that kind of content did not decrease. In some cases, it even increased.
Here's one thing I'll say about the anti-vax misinformation. I do actually believe that it vexed Mark. I do think that his efforts to get people vaccinated from COVID were sincere and came from a place of real concern. Not enough concern to say ever make necessary changes to the algorithm in the name of global public health, but concern nonetheless. The man is many things, but he's not stupid, and he clearly knows how essential vaccines are, especially in childhood. His wife is literally a pediatrician.
That's what makes his recent pivot, which we'll get to in a bit, going on Joe Rogan and trying to court the anti-vaxxers back into his good graces, so nakedly ghoulish. And now, let's move from genocide and pandemics to the part where we explore how Mark, like so many other men feted as Silicon Valley geniuses, had one good idea, followed by many, many stupid ones.
Like me at bottomless mimosa brunch.
Facebook once had something called gifts. I don't know if you remember this, Julia. They were just little, pictures. They were little pictures of things that you could buy using real money and post on other people's pages.
I wonder if that's what became the basis for, what are those, the
NFTs?
Yeah.
Right now, they're just kind of like recycling the stupid.
In 2013, the company introduced something called Facebook Home, which allowed users to change their smartphone home screen to their Facebook newsfeed. Nobody liked it, and nobody used it. And who could forget the pivot to video, a move by Facebook to push news outlets to create video content that basically destroyed newsrooms all over the country by forcing them to move away from written content and into video content.
Except investigations and leaks revealed that Facebook was dramatically inflating the amount of user engagement and views on Facebook videos by somewhere between 60 and 80%, according to legal filings and internal documents. But by the time the truth came out, it was too late. Whoops. And the American news media was an ash pile.
A lot of the Facebook projects that flopped were simply half-assed clones of things that already existed.
Facebook introduced something called Honesty Box at one point, which was sort of like the anonymous messaging app Yik Yak. Do you remember Yik Yak?
Facebook also introduced something called Facebook Questions, which was a ripoff of the question-answering site Quora, or Yahoo Answers, the site of the most legendary internet question submission of all time. How is Babby formed?
How is Babby formed?
I don't know.
God, I miss the old internet. I miss it when a person could, at the click of a button, find out for themselves how girl get prognod. Facebook also tried ripping off Pinterest with an app called Hobby.
And who can forget about all the times Facebook has tried to rip off Snapchat? One version of the Poke app involved disappearing photo messages, which were like Snapchat, except unlike Snapchat, nobody liked it when Facebook did it. And later, Facebook acquired Instagram, and they introduced Instagram Stories, which was, you guessed it, also meant to be like Snapchat. Facebook has tried to stop TikTok from eating its lunch, not by making a product that is better or faster than TikTok, but by being lucky enough to exist at the exact moment that the federal government is playing regulatory footsie with TikTok's parent company.
You're forgetting Instagram Reels, Julia, Facebook's version of TikTok.
In the spirit of Instagram Reels being late to everything, I will mention Reels 3 weeks from now.
Okay, that makes sense. There was also Facebook Threads, which was popular for like 5 seconds because Elon Musk, another fucking guy, was driving Twitter off a cliff like a Tesla on full self-driving mode.
In an attempt to make a website that was friendlier and less political than Twitter, Facebook made a website that was a bland stream of warm, liquefied, public relations vetted goo.
Ew.
Missing everything that made Twitter funny and interesting and also lacking in functionality. Within the first weeks of its existence, it went from 50 million daily users to fewer than 10 million daily users, and now the only reason I go to Threads is accidentally. Facebook has also tried to muscle other tech companies like Substack by buying up talent that would otherwise go elsewhere.
But that's how the company works. It has massive valuations and it's a banana, Michael. What's it cost? $10 amounts of money to shell out to people who they think can help them. So they just throw their massive amounts of money at any problem they might have.
And often that problem is Mark is out of ideas. You can't code your way out of not having ideas.
But maybe, just maybe, you can hardware your way out, right? At least that was the idea behind Building 8, an entire division of Facebook that was supposed to start making actual hardware that flopped like a high diver with vertigo. In a single year, Building 8 spent $100 million. Some of it was on regular stuff like salaries for high-level employees, but a lot of it was on lavish parties, like the one they threw where all attendees were issued stainless steel invitations that were cut into custom beer bottle openers at the door.
No. Again, jail. Jail for everybody.
At the end of the Building 8 spending bacchanalia, the only product that they had produced was Facebook Portal, which was basically a shitty iPad that you could use to FaceTime with your Facebook friends. That hit the market with a thud in 2018, selling over its first months a whopping 54,000 units, almost enough to fill a college football stadium with people who fall for email phishing scams.
2018 happened to be a pretty bad year for Facebook headline-wise. Former employees and well-connected journalists had reported that the People You May Know feature was a preferred way for pedophiles to connect with children. The real treasure is the friends you groom along the way. But Facebook double plus promised that they were not collecting data from Portal users the same way they were collecting data from people using things like Messenger.
But Zuck was apparently crossing his fingers behind his back when he tried to trust me bro his way into people's living rooms. Because after promising to not collect data from Portal, sure, fine, they were collecting a teeny tiny bit of data from Portal. Actually, they were collecting the same amount of data from Portal they were from messages.
Got it.
But we'd be remiss if we talked about Facebook's failures without dunking on so-called tech visionary Zuckerberg going so hard on the pumped-up faceplant that was the Metaverse. I don't think even Mark Zuckerberg knew what it was. Here he is back in 2021, so balls deep in the Metaverse that he was changing the name of his company from Facebook to Meta.
I am proud to announce that starting today, our company is now Meta. From now on, we're going to be Metaverse first, not Facebook first. And as our new brand starts showing up in our products, I hope that people come to know the Meta brand and the future that we stand for.
So it's sort of a virtual reality game, but also a meeting space, but it's also not fun. And also you need special headgear to be inside it, like the real world, but worse.
Yeah, if your bullshit detectors are pinging, that means they're working. Nobody could really describe what the Metaverse was. Not then, not now, not ever. By October 2022, Meta had lost $13.7 billion on their quest to rule the Metaverse. And here's what they had to show for it.
We shouldn't really have to physically be together to feel present or collaborate or brainstorm. What we're trying to move towards is a world where a lot of what we do is in here. And
how is that better? How is whatever this is better?
What if video but shitty and glitchy and boring and you cover head with? And whole world meeting. In addition to the Horizon workspaces you just saw, Zuckerberg also envisioned something called Decentraland, which, well, I'm just going to read you a direct quote from him trying to explain what it is. There are many ways to define Decentraland. It is a three-dimensional online platform allowing users to be part of a shared digital experience where they can play games, socialize, and create, buy, or sell digital items. If you have virtual or augmented reality goggles, you can wear them while in Decentraland or load the program on the screen of one of your devices and play it like a game.
Some people were onto Zuck from the jump, like writer and podcast host Ed Zitron, who has described the metaverse as, quote, a huge con used by the tech industry to pretend they're innovating.
Because it wasn't a tangible idea as much as it was a thing for techies to pretend they understood so they didn't feel left out at conferences. And of course, that collective charade by tech bros would once again goad FOMO-drunk investors into giving tech companies more money, which means that it doesn't really matter if the metaverse or anything Mark Zuckerberg goes on about will ever exist, as long as enough people believe that it will one day exist. Wall Street will slurp up Mark's blustery nonsense like Barry Keoghan in Jacob Elordi's bathtub.
How dare you? This is a family show. This is a family show. But the thing is, even though Zuckerberg was totally wrong about the metaverse being the future, it's not completely dead either. You can still blow the Cheeto dust off your old Oculus headset and go into some of the spaces that Facebook made. It feels a little bit like being inside of a Chuck E. Cheese after it's been closed and all the machines have been turned off.
In February 2023, Zuckerberg announced that the company's new focus was going to be AI. Another thing that already existed in one form that doesn't seem to serve any purpose beyond making a small number of people rich while the world gets worse.
Unlike the other failures of the past, Zuckerberg can't drown this one out. It's embarrassing that Facebook changed its name to Meta in anticipation of being a metaverse-focused company, and now they're not talking about the metaverse at all. It's like getting a tattoo of somebody's name and then getting a divorce, and if anybody mentions them again, acting like you never knew them.
And speaking of divorce, earlier we mentioned that Zuck has what many have classified as big divorced guy energy lately. Recently, Mark has ditched the guy who got beat up in 8 Mile, Caesar-style haircut, and the founder hoodie ensemble. In its place, Mark has a new look. He's grown out his hair into something between robust 70s bush and mop, and now wears loose-fitting overpriced t-shirts and chains and expensive watches, like a guy who will give you HPV at the CAA Grammys party.
Beautiful. One outlet referred to his new look as, quote, Gen Z Riz. Gen Z Riz, a likable dude next door who goes to the gym and eats a carnivore diet, who's into MMA and speaks to camera like a former Supreme bro who now makes TikTok videos on how to max out your aura.
I don't want that guy to be my neighbor. It sounds like Mark's PR team wrote that article to roll out his rebrand, and because Mark's in his 40s, it's pretty obvious that it's giving "How do you do, fellow kids?" and not Gen Z Riz. But let's pause here and think about what Mark Zuckerberg is really doing. He's not just being a douche. He sees an opportunity to get more people to use Facebook by pretending that Facebook is now a rough and tumble place for cool boys to roughhouse. No girls allowed, boys only, dumb ones.
Yeah, he also announced that Facebook is ditching fact-checking and allowing more offensive speech on his platform under the guise of free speech.
Okay, so then Zuck took the biggest, sweatiest stage of all, Joe Rogan's podcast, where he hoped to reach Rogan's audience of men who pronounce it espresso and think that RFK Jr. has some interesting ideas. Julia, I listened to the entire Joe Rogan Mark Zuckerberg interview, and it was about as entertaining as an audiobook of a creatine warning label. The two yammered on about things like MMA fighting, supplements, hunting wild pigs, and then there was the part where he whined about how the Biden administration bullied him into censoring vaccine-skeptical information.
Wow, so sorry. A million people died. I'm so sorry for
you.
That Biden yelled at you once.
God.
We should note here that the way Zuck characterized it really downplayed how rampant vaccine mis- and disinformation was on his platform. Completely absurd content like the documentary, quote, Plandemic, and vaccine-skeptical content was routinely the most shared and engaged with on the platform. Like we said earlier, Facebook wasn't encouraging free debate. It was giving a megaphone to bad actors and morons and endangering people's lives in the process.
I was particularly moved by the part of the Rogan interview when Zuck lamented the loss of, quote, masculine energy in corporate culture. That is a very masculine thing to talk about how masculine you are. An ironic thing for the CEO of a company that has had some issues hiring and retaining women in the past. It's also clearly a bid to convince Rogan's listeners that he is who he thinks they want him to be.
You look different. When you walked in here today, you look thicker. You look like a different guy. You do. You look like a jiu-jitsu guy now. It's funny. I saw your neck. I'm like, his neck's bigger. Your neck is bigger.
Good.
Are you using iron neck or is it just for training?
I do like iron neck.
Iron neck.
Iron
whatever
neck.
That is.
I don't know. It's a thing you can do. It requires discipline and manliness.
But Rogan's listeners, to their credit, I guess, can smell bullshit even when it's wearing a gold chain and a big, big watch. Zuck is also sucking up to President Trump, a guy he once pretended to think was bad. According to a Wall Street Journal report from January, Meta has agreed to shell out about $25 million to settle a lawsuit that Trump filed against Meta when Facebook banned Trump from the platform in 2021 after, inciting a riot with the intention of overthrowing the government. Mark was also seen sitting front row at the inauguration, staring at Jeff Bezos' girlfriend's big fake tits like a college virgin.
Masculinity is back.
All this posturing is successfully drawing focus on what should be the central issue when we talk about Facebook and Instagram. They are not good or fun anymore, and they keep getting worse. What was once a way to keep in touch with people and issue ironic pokes is now a never-ending stream of content designed to keep people using the apps with comment sections full of accounts that look and act suspiciously like spammers and AI. Meanwhile, Mark keeps getting richer at all of our expense, and he doesn't care who gets hurt and how much worse the world is when the tactic is deployed on a global scale.
Mark Zuckerberg, like so many other fucking guys who fancy themselves beloved geniuses, geniuses, is nothing more than a simp for power. He's a tryhard who desperately wants to be cool. And because so many people suck up to him to get to his money, he actually believes it. In one internal Facebook email that was one of the many, many leaks from the company, Zuckerberg referred to himself as, quote, the most well-known person of my generation. Really? Really, Mark? More well-known than Taylor Swift, Cristiano Ronaldo, Patrick Mahomes? The most well-known millennial, Mark. Maybe consider getting punched in the head less. Mark, look. All the top-of-the-line MMA coaching in the world can't make you into somebody else. You're not a cool masculine bro. You're not a visionary. You're a weird nerd asshole with a face that looks like Beaker from the Muppets fucked a human foot and hair that looks like it was scalped from Miss Roper that you're wearing like a pelt.
Hey, one day Mark might learn how often to blink, and then it's over for you hoes.
Okay, Julia, on a scale of 1 to 5 weasels, where does Mark Zuckerberg fall?
He's probably a good 4.5. He's a good 4.5. Maybe he's a 4.5, 5. I don't know. I don't want to give everybody a 5, but we do cover the worst guys.
That's true. Here's the thing. We just did Stephen Miller, and he's a hard 5, right?
Yes.
And I would be much less disgusted spending an afternoon hanging around Mark Zuckerberg than I would Stephen Miller.
Right.
For me, Zuck's got to be a 4.5.
Yeah.
One day, we'll invent a time machine, and one brave woman of the future will get into that time machine, and she will go back to the year 2002, Harvard University, and she will touch Mark Zuckerberg's penis.
For the good of humanity.
And none of this would have ever happened. All right. Well, that about wraps up this episode of This Fucking Guy.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share. Take care. Be well.
And go fuck yourself, Mark Zuckerberg.